Where you guys choose to collect data and report data is an important step for learning more about your water quality resources. In this chapter, we're going to cover things to consider as well as how to report your location to attribute your data to. In this chapter, we're going to cover 4 main topics. The first is what you guys should have in mind as goals or things to be aware of when choosing your site. The other should be what factors you should consider, like some program requirements or what we consider a site. We'll also talk about how you can identify your site location to staff so we can create a point in the database that associates your data. And finally, we'll talk about the data headers, which includes site information. The headers are something present on all of your data sheets, and a lot of scientists record this information when they go and collect their samples. So we'll start with choosing a site and how someone decides where to monitor. Choosing where to monitor can be really informative for how you look and learn about the local conditions of a stream. So a lot of people have streams in their backyard or streams in their local neighborhood that they have access to, and those are great places to monitor because honestly, state agencies, most of our access points come from road crossings. So data collected in more localized areas could be more informative and help bridge some of our gaps. So it's great if you have access to a stream from your property or from neighboring properties and using that as a way to select your site. It's also great to again think about where you and your family recreate. If you guys go to a park often, or if you go to a conservation area or a wilderness area and you often are playing in that stream, this data again can be informative to knowing that that stream is safe and also promoting protections of a stream that you value for recreational purposes. And if you think about it, our macro collection has a lot to do with aquatic life and fishing. So again, this can help protect some of those recreational uses within your streams. It's also important to consider, again, these are all kind of goals, so there are things to keep in mind when you're selecting your sites or kind of historical reasons why monitors have selected certain areas. But pollutant concerns can also be a component of that. So if you are worried that the water quality in a local stream has changed, if you are worried that we could be doing more to protect these resources, data is an ammunition. Data and education is supporting maybe concerns and could help show that additional resources could be put within this watershed or that follow-up professional monitoring needs to occur in these areas that we don't already know. You can also reach out to either MDC or MoDNR email addresses and ask if we can maybe help, if we have suggestions for where you can monitor. Particularly, it might help to pinpoint some goals or pinpoint kind of location requirements if you can travel or if you can't. But we can also try to see if we have any programs or things we can partner you with for collecting data. We can also, again, you guys collecting data can help bridge some monitoring gaps. So we can show you kind of some of our resources, but a lot of streams don't have data on it or don't have recent data on it. So you can again reach out to a MoDNR staff member and we can pull and see if there's any data collected for a certain area. And we can also help kind of bridge our gaps in monitoring data to help provide more information and education on our resources. So these are all areas in which you can have goals in mind and considerations when selecting your monitoring site. If you're interested in bridging a monitoring gap, you can look up monitoring gaps by accessing the Missouri Stream Team interactive map. If you zoom in using this map, you may find some streams that don't have a data indicator icon. This icon is a black beaker with a bug inside. If your stream is missing an icon, it may have no volunteer data collected on it before, so it may be a good or new information if you can monitor on that site. You can also reach out to a staff member at streamteam@dnr.mo.gov to ask where professional data is missing and if you can help bridge gaps for what data we have professionally. There's 115,000 miles of stream systems, and we do have a lot of streams that are missing data, as well as some streams with data that is quite old. Another thing that can happen is some of these sites with the black beaker icon are currently being monitored. Majority of these sites were monitored historically, but are actually open and needing someone to pick them up to continue on the data that was previously collected. If you're not sure where to monitor, these black icons are good indicators of places where someone has previously been able to safely access a stream. Feel free to reach out to staff and ask if any of these sites are open so you can adopt one of these sites as a new monitoring location. Now we're going to talk about some requirements or factors to consider when selecting a monitoring site. When it comes to monitoring a stream, it is important to consider what type of stream system you have. We categorize streams into 3 different categories: perennial, ephemeral, and intermittent streams. These streams are classified based upon their flow patterns, and the flow patterns are relevant to how the stream channel is embedded within the groundwater table. So this up and down feature is showing that groundwater table, and this line here is outlining each type of stream's stream channel. Perennial streams are streams that have constant flowing water throughout all times of the year. Part of the reason that it will have constantly flowing water is that the stream channel is constantly submerged within the groundwater table. So there is influence from the groundwater into the flow patterns of that stream. The intermittent stream may have a fluctuating relationship with its stream channel within the groundwater table. Intermittent streams will always have water, but that water during dry periods may be pooled. Ephemeral, as the name suggests, may have temporary flowing water. So that stream channel may be above the groundwater table, so it doesn't have a feed-in or influence from groundwater, and most of the water that contributes to ephemeral streams may be due to runoff or rain events. So ephemeral streams are fed by rain or precipitation. Intermittent streams will have pools throughout the year because it is partially embedded. Its stream channel is partially embedded within the groundwater table, and perennial streams will have constant flow throughout the year. When it comes to monitoring, keep in mind the type of stream you're monitoring in. The best kinds of streams are perennial streams that have constant flowing water. Intermittent streams are also good, but keep in mind that those streams must at least maintain pools within dry periods. If you are not sure if your stream is intermittent or ephemeral, it may be helpful to check your stream during a dry period, such as late summer, to make sure that the stream is maintaining at least pools. A monitoring site is really a section of stream. We consider these sections to be roughly 300 feet in length. When you're selecting a monitoring area or site, we do recommend that you also keep a lookout for habitat, or at least one riffle, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. We also recommend that you make sure, especially if you're having multiple sites and one upstream and downstream, that you keep your sites separate and you don't overlap. You don't want to be collecting net sets, maybe upstream of a bridge and downstream of a bridge, especially if you're considering those two different data points. They could be representing different water quality upstream and downstream, so that's why it helps to keep your data uniform and located to one area. So again, keep in mind monitoring sites are 300 feet in length, roughly the size of one football field. Here are examples of habitat to consider when looking for your monitoring site. So you may have access to your site by a trail or a road crossing, but if you don't see habitat like this or other habitats that we outline in the macroinvertebrate chapters, you may want to walk a little bit upstream or downstream until you find a good habitat sampling area, especially if your goal is to look at the aquatic life or the macroinvertebrates within your stream system. Here in a picture are outlines of a riffle, which is an area of stream that is shallow and the water runs over the rocks. You can kind of outline a riffle by seeing where it's kind of bubbling or more active water moving over the rocks. This is great habitat to sample your net sets with. So when you're looking for your site, try to have habitat in mind for picking a good spot. So important considerations to think about, again, what are your goals of monitoring? Are you looking to monitor in a stream that doesn't have a lot of data? Are you looking to protect biological life? So you need habitat. Are you looking to protect a pristine water? Are you looking to find if it's contaminated by pollutants? What concerns or what goals of protections do you have in mind will help you kind of select a site, or if you need help and guidance on selecting a site, it will help orient us for how to coach you on a good site selection. Another thing to think about, again, if you're concerned about and you're interested in doing biomonitoring, make sure that you have habitat present. The habitat's going to be covered in the macro chapters, but in summary, there are those riffles, so the tumbling water area, root mats, so kind of fibrous roots that have been submerged underwater for long periods of time. Snags, so woody debris that's been in water for a long period of time, and non-flow areas. But riffles are kind of the best areas to sample with our protocols. So keep in mind the habitat presence. Also, again, think about maybe why you're monitoring. So if you're concerned with a potential pollutant in source, so either it be non-point source or point, it might help to have a monitoring spot downstream of those source areas as well as upstream to compare how those sources are changing the water quality within your local stream. Another thing to keep in mind is you don't want anything intersecting your site. So if possible, you're going to want to be either upstream or downstream of tributaries and even road crossings, particularly, if an accident occurs, having a site either downstream or upstream of that road crossing could help have a comparison of how the water quality has changed. Here's an example or image of a monitoring site. Keep in mind that a monitoring site is 300 feet in length and 100 yards. So we wouldn't want our monitoring site to be in the middle of this picture because there would be a tributary coming in to the site in the middle of your site collection. So for this reference, you'd want to be collecting data always downstream of where this tributary is coming in. You can also see at the site there's habitat present, so this would be helpful for when sampling for macroinvertebrates. So these are important things to keep in mind when choosing a site. Site accessibility may also be dependent on permission from local landowners, particularly if you need to cross a property to access a stream site. We have resources and tools that can help you all ask for permission to monitor or walk through someone's property. This publication is posted on the Stream Team website under About Us tab, the link publication, and it's called Hello Streamside Landowner. This document has kind of an outline of what you're doing, and it also has a way that you can provide your personal contact information. Remember, when you're monitoring your site, requesting permission is beneficial because it can make your monitoring more safe, and requesting permission can also promote an avenue for education and outreach on those stream resources as well. We also recommend that you ask permission from public areas such as state parks or conservation areas. Most likely, folks working at these areas will be happy that you're monitoring and interested in the data you're collecting. There may be some studies going on in these local streams that a conservation agent or state park agent may recommend that you steer away from certain areas when it comes to data collection. So letting folks know in public areas is also beneficial, as well as letting folks know what you're doing in a private land access. If you have questions on this, like how to find a property owner, you can also contact a Stream Team staff member and we can try to assist you. So here is a scenario and kind of illustration of what to consider when selecting different monitoring sites based upon your goals. The dashed line is outlining the larger watershed, and the dotted lines are indicating subwatersheds within this larger watershed. The black lines are illustrating rivers or streams. These little black lines are what we call tributaries because they're running into this larger stem of stream. When selecting a site, something to consider, especially if you're looking at how water quality has changed or if your water quality has been impacted, it is important to select a water that is upstream of an area and downstream of a potential impact area. So if you look at sites 2 and 3, you can see that 2 is upstream because it's monitoring in a headwater, and that 3 is downstream of another sub-watershed's tributary coming in. So if you were concerned about non-point source or management practices potentially going on in the sub-watershed and how it's influencing this main stem of water, monitoring upstream of where that tributary comes in and downstream of your tributary coming in would be beneficial to compare the data and see if there's an impact. If your water quality is worse at Site 3, you may be able to say, hey, maybe something's going on in this watershed, or it could be an outreach moment of could different management practices be applied within this watershed to help improve the water quality? If you also look at sites 4 and 5, let's say this square right here is a point source. So it's piping potential pollutants into this main stem of the water. Again, to see if that's impacting water quality and to help compare, it's helpful to have a site upstream of the point source and then downstream of that point source, and you could compare the data to see if it's different. Also, something to consider is if you have a site like this site number 1, when mapping out and looking at your watershed, this site number 1 again may give you a holistic picture of all the different point and non-point sources contributing to the water quality of this main stem of the river. So different sites can help tell a story or help provide a comparison of some of the data you collect. We're going to talk about how you guys can identify your location to us so we can create a site within our system to associate your data to. In order for you all to enter data into our system, we will need to have an identifying feature for where you are monitoring. We do this by requesting a map of your location, a physical description of your site, and also numbering your site if you have multiple. So when you're submitting a map to us, please make sure that you're zoomed in to a view in which we can easily see identifying features such as nearby roads or other rivers coming into your stream. And also keep in mind to mark your area in which you are monitoring. Your marked feature, keep in mind that it should be upstream or downstream of things such as tributaries or maybe a point source as well. If for some reason you submit information to us and not all of it correlates, such as your map differs from your site description, we may need to follow up with you in order to have verification for where you're monitoring. All of the monitoring sites are then updated to the Stream Team Interactive Map. We do require a physical site description of your site as well as a map. This can be helpful for when someone may take over your site in the future to continue the path of data for that site. And it can also help someone find your site so that it's within the exact same location. We do not accept GPS coordinates as a substitute to a good verbal description. We've had experiences where GPS coordinates have not accurately portrayed where somebody was monitoring. So currently that's not what we're using as a substitute. So please keep in mind to verbally describe your site when you're submitting a map to us. Helpers for describing your site are using permanent landmarks when you're describing your site. The best permanent landmark to use are often roads nearby. If you use something too specific, like a business, those businesses can change and it may be confusing for where you were actually monitoring. So keep in mind, downstream and upstream of road crossings are good examples, as well as specific distances. So on the Stream Team Interactive Map, you can actually measure out how far downstream or upstream you are of a potential intersection. A good example of a site description is provided below. You could tell they've measured the distance, and they have also provided an indicator of what direction it is compared to a permanent landmark feature. So the example here is 300 feet downstream of Highway AA. Site numbers are entered into our system chronologically per volunteer. So when a volunteer submits a site to us, we'll enter that data in and it will be their site number 1. When a volunteer submits data for that site number 1, that becomes permanent and we can no longer remove that site. So if you go out to your first site and you collect data and you decide, hey, the site was actually really tricky to get to, I want to look for an easier site, you can add and submit a map to us and a physical description, and we'll add on a new site, but your new site will be numbered site number 2, so on and so forth. So if you're submitting multiple sites at once, we will try to number your sites based on what you're suggesting to us, but we can't go back and delete or change sites once they're in our system. So your first site is always your site number 1. Something to keep in mind as well is that sites are associated to individuals. So if you are submitting a map to us, we are entering that location in per your specific information. Sometimes we have requests to tag someone to a stream team's site, and it can be difficult for us. We have no way of looking up what site that stream team is monitoring. We need to know more information, like what stream or what individual was monitoring beforehand. So, site numbering, not too much to worry about except for the fact that it's numbered chronologically, and your first site will always be your site number 1. Here is an example of a great new site map submission to us. You can see here the star is outlining that point for where they are monitoring. The roads are clearly labeled, so easy to identify, as well as the stream. You can also tell that they've used the measuring tool to measure the distance that their monitoring point is away from a road crossing. So their physical site description is 1/4 mile downstream from Highway 17 bridge, parallel to Pippin Road. So this is a clear site description using permanent landmark features. They've also provided additional helpful information such as Pulaski County. So say these are common road names, or this is a common creek name such as Turkey Creek. Identifying the county or nearby cities can help orient our search and easier locate your site, especially if you're zoomed into this level. Also, great things to have paired with your map is your name, so we can easily identify and look you up within the system, site number, particularly if you have multiple sites, as well as the stream name. So things we need are the site map, indicating where you're monitoring, that physical site description, and then numbers if you have multiple sites. We accept any kind of map to help identify your site as long as it has features in which we can locate your site with. Here are some options for maps that you can use to identify your site. The best map in which you can do this with is the Stream Team Interactive Map, so the one on the Stream Team website. It is helpful to look at this map because the black icons indicate where folks have monitored before. You may be wanting to pick up a site in which someone had previously collected data on, so this would be a site adoption. You can also look around and see where the black icons are missing. This may be an area in which there is a data gap. The Stream Team Interactive Map is a great indicator as well as to where areas in the stream are potentially accessible or historically were accessible. So the Stream Team Interactive Map is a good go-to. It has that measuring tool. When using this map, you will have to take a screenshot or snip of your site to send it to us in an email. The DNR Interactive Map also has these sites laid out, and they may have more filter drop-downs that could be helpful Again, if you have specific concerns, maybe for point source, non-point source, has waste, this may be more useful, but a lot of these filters are also available on the Stream Team interactive map. Google Maps is also a great tool if that's what you're more comfortable with and familiar with. Feel free to submit that to us, but just be aware that you may be selecting a duplicate site in which someone is already monitoring, so we may have some feedback to you and request that you move upstream or downstream of the site that you are looking to monitor. All right, we're going to talk about the datasheet headers. So all scientists, when they go out and monitor, they commonly fill out information on their sample bottles. And one of the things that they commonly fill out is a description of where they monitored. So we're going to go over a few more features than just, hey, where did you monitor? But this is why it's kind of relevant to the site selection page, is it's important to have an identifier of where and when you monitored and the conditions associated to the data you collected. Here is an example of the header information that is present on all of our data sheets. You can see that it outlines where you monitored, when you monitored, what the conditions were like, as well as who is a responsible data submitter. So who has taken the training and who can a staff member follow up with in regards to the data that was collected on this data sheet. We allow for two ways in which folks can submit their data. Online is the easiest, and some of this site identifier location will auto-populate for you. When you are entering your data online, be sure to check that your site location is consistent throughout your data entry process. It is easy to submit for the wrong site if you have multiple, which is totally okay if that happens. You'll need to contact a staff member, and that staff member will have to delete that data entry, and then you could submit the data for the proper site. Also, be sure to check if your site location has migrated over time. If it's greater than 300 feet away from what you originally proposed, this may be a good indicator to start a new monitoring site location. So we'd need a new map and we could start a new pathway of data collection. For online data entry, date and time is required. So be sure that you record this when you are out in the field. Date, again, we're pretty literal on date, so that is month, day, and year. And time is in military time. Rainfall is also something that can be helpful to collect when it comes to data interpretation. We'll talk more about that. And water temperature, be sure to collect that in degrees Celsius. You'll also want the person submitting the data or who's responsible for the data to have the map or the site listed under their name so that they can properly do data entry. If you are not an online person and you like to physically submit things, that is okay. You can mail us your data. If that is the process in which you would like to submit your data, please be sure that your location information is consistent to what you have submitted on the map, and also be sure to have completed the date, so month, day, and year, time, and time. If you're missing information or if some information is inconsistent, we will follow up with you, and there may be some delays in us entering that data for you. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to any Stream Team staff and we can help you. One of the categories on the header information, which is optional to submit, is the rainfall before your monitoring event. This can be helpful when it comes to interpretation of your data, particularly if you've had a heavy rainfall, which may impact non-point source runoff, or your biological life and excessive flow conditions within your stream. The go-to that we recommend for looking up rainfall, particularly for 7 days before your monitoring event, is utilizing weatherunderground.com. Using Weather Underground, you can select the Maps and Radar feature and look at their Wonder Map component. On the Wonder Map, they have multiple stations that have precipitation data if you select that precipitation filter. When looking for data, you want to make sure that that rain data is as close to your site as possible. We also recommend that the same zip code is an okay go-to for if that gauge is close enough to your site. Once you see your options for the closest station, you can go ahead and select the icon, click Station ID, and that station will give you a historical options for looking up the rainfall. You can select weekly mode and it automatically calculates how much rain would have occurred the week before your monitoring event if you enter in the correct date of your monitoring event. There are other resources such as weather.com or NOAA. These you may be able to look up the daily rainfall and then add them all together in order to calculate the rainfall that occurred a week before your monitoring event. Again, use the resources that make sense for you and your practices. You can also use a rain gauge, particularly if you live near your monitoring site or within that same watershed. Just be sure to dump that rain gauge out 7 days before you go out to monitor so that you can get an accurate reading. If you have questions on how to look up rainfall, we have a walkthrough kind of email or guidance to make it more clear, so feel free to reach out to staff if you have questions on how to do this. When it comes to submitting your data, a lot of things can go wrong. It's okay to make mistakes, but here are some kind of examples of some historical mistakes to be aware of so we can avoid these when you guys go out to your site. Again, if you're interested in doing online data entry, some of this will be automated for you, or it won't allow you to submit the data if you didn't fill out certain fields properly. So you can see an example here of a mistake is under the date. It says 4/11. Again, if this was a paper submission, we would have to follow up because we don't know if the person means month, year, if they mean month, day, but then what year? Was it this year or the year before? Again, we're quite literal when it comes to what people write on the data sheet. We don't want to assume the data, so we would follow up if this was a paper submission. If you're submitting online, it would flag it and say, hey, this is incomplete, and you can make a correction. Something to also be aware of is time. We require military time. So if you write down 6:30, we're going to assume that you're an early riser and we're out at your stream at 6:30 in the morning. So please be cognizant of what time you're putting down. If you actually went out at 6:30 p.m., the correct time to write would be 18:30. Our database only allows numbers to be entered within rainfall, so if you had no rainfall recorded the week before, 0 would be the correct number for you. Water temperature in Celsius at 73 degrees is really, really, really hot. So most likely what happened is that that was recorded in Fahrenheit. So please be cognizant and aware of what units we're asking for when it comes to data entry, because 73 is a red flag for a potential error. So just be cognizant and take your time when you're out sampling as well as when you're doing data entry. Also keep in mind that when you're submitting that physical site description to us, when you're looking to have your site added, that we need permanent landmark features. So we can't use these GPS coordinates, and behind the Smith place by the big oak tree doesn't really make sense to us when we're trying to look on a map or if we're trying to describe your site for someone else to pick up 3 years down the road. So take your time, be descriptive. Again, if you're submitting online, some of these fields will auto-populate for you, which is great. But if you're submitting a paper data, please be sure to fill this out completely and accurately. In summary, if you guys were to not identify on any of your data sheets where you went out to monitor, we cannot enter in that data if you're submitting a physical copy to us. So please be explicit when you're doing your data entry or when you're filling out your data sheets to mail them into us. Also, when you're submitting a map to us, please be sure that what you have is all matching. So for example, if you're identifying your site location with a marker, just try to have your site location description accurately depict that marker feature. It is important that we know the location and can associate your data to a specific area of sampling. When you are looking at a map of your site, you may find that the stream you're monitoring on does not have an official name that is showing up on the map. If that is the case, likely your stream is intermittent, and the way in which we will name it is tributary to that next larger body of water that your stream runs into. There may be multiple streams that your stream will run into before you can find the actual name of your stream. When it comes to naming a stream, we have had a few stream members that have applied to have their streams officially named within the Geographic Names Information System. This is a great way to provide additional community and awareness for a local body of water. If you are interested in naming a stream, or if you're not sure what the name of your stream is, please feel free to reach out to staff. The first step in submitting a site to us is through attending a training. So please be sure to watch through these videos as well as to attend a field training before you email a map to us. A map is required by our program for you to be able to submit data. If we don't have that identification within the database, there's no place for you to submit your data to. Also keep in mind that when you're providing a map, please be sure to identify your location on the map, as well as provide a physical site description using permanent landmarks. It is also helpful to provide your name, county in which you're monitoring, any additional sites and number them, your stream name, which could be tributary to. If you are adopting a site that you found on the Stream Team interactive map using the beaker icons, you can select the beaker icon and take a screenshot of that icon and include the site IDX information. If you do this, it is super easy for us to find that site again and add you to that site. All this information can be submitted to streamteam@dnr.mo.gov. If online submission or online is not the way for you, you can give us a call and we will accept your data through mail-in efforts and we'll provide our address for that. All right, we're going to go through a little summary with some questions of some of the features we've covered in this chapter. Number 1, how long is your monitoring site? Think about those football fields. It's 100 yards or 300 feet in length. What is important to consider when selecting a site? Again, there's many different factors based upon your personal goals, but things to think about are, is it safe? So can you get down the stream banks with equipment? Do you have access or permission? What are your goals? Are you interested in learning about macroinvertebrates? You might need some habitat available to do that sampling. What's going on? Are you concerned about stormwater impacting your water quality? Well, maybe you want to monitor near some stormwater systems. So there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to how or where you select a site. Keep in mind what your goals may be. Are you concerned about the water chemistry? Are you concerned about the life of your stream? So the macros. Are GPS coordinates okay for a good verbal site location description? So when it comes to describing your site, we require a physical site description that's verbal. We cannot just accept GPS coordinates at this time, so please be sure to describe your site so that it's easy for someone else to pick it up at some point down the road. What 3 things must match for accurate site mapping? That will be where you've identified your site to that verbal site description, and then if you have multiple numbers, just making sure those numbers make sense. So site and site description are the most important parts, and that number. Here's our contact information. If you have any questions on where to monitor or how to select a site, please feel free to reach out to staff.